We have to design a future that draws from the past, and I think Iraq could do that really well. If you think about machine learning and AI as something that just that developers do, you're only getting half the picture. Geez, you guys are hitting me with the big questions here. I like it.
Welcome everyone to the next in AI4Iraq's exclusive interview series. My name is Rayan, with me Iman in Hong Kong, Jude in London, and Ahmed in Iraq. Today we are thrilled to have live from the UK Dr. Jonnie Penn. Dr. Penn currently is an associate teaching professor of AI ethics in the University of Cambridge, where he explores AI's potential to shape human behavior and society. It would be impossible to list all of Dr. Penn's amazing accomplishments, but some highlights include that he was a #1 New York Times bestselling author, he was a former Google Technology Fellow, and once upon a time was a star of the hit MTV series The Buried Life. Dr. Penn, welcome to AI4Iraq.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Hello, Dr. Penn. This is Ahmed from London. Dr. Penn, we've been following your career for several years now and are delighted to welcome you to our show. Now, for our audience in Iraq, could you tell us your career path which led you to today and your focus on ethical AI?
Sure. Well, since you mentioned my background years ago when I was a young person, I'll start maybe with that. When I was in my teens, my brother and I were very close, and a friend of his passed away unexpectedly. And it made us think at a young age about what we wanted to do with this precious life that we have. And so we wrote a list of things to do before you die. And we thought, if we could cross off every single goal, how amazing would that be? And we decided, why don't we help somebody every time we get one done? So there's sort of a connection to the world as we aspire to do these things. And we thought we would do it for 2 weeks, and it became a much bigger project, sort of maybe what like you guys are doing here. It's you start it and it grows and grows. And after doing that project for about 10 years, I started to see the world differently. I'd met young people all around the globe. I'd been able to travel and do some incredible things, like playing basketball with the president. That was an unexpected item that we crossed off the list. That came true. And I thought, young people kept coming to me and asking for advice on life, and I thought, I've got kind of influence here, but I don't feel like I have any authority to give them good answers about the questions that they're asking me, sometimes very tough questions about what to do with life, or if they're struggling with mental health challenges like anxiety and depression and things like that. And so one of the items on the list was to get a degree. Do you guys want to get a degree one day? Do you want to go to university? Yeah? Yes. Yeah, no, I felt that way too. And I thought, I'm so close to, I'd done most of it, but then I'd had to stop doing it because we made a television series. And so I thought, I'm going to do a little bit more of it. So I kind of figured out how to do it on the side. And this became a slippery slope because I loved it. And so I did a little bit, and then I did a little bit more. And I got a master's degree at the University of Cambridge, and then I did a PhD there, and then a postdoc, and then I've started teaching. And, at each step, I think it was just about curiosity. What is going on? And you guys have that same curiosity now. And our mutual curiosity is in the realm of artificial intelligence. I became very interested in the history of artificial intelligence. Where did it come from? How long have people been working on this in this area? And what are the implications, the scientific and kind of cultural and economic implications? So that was my journey. It was quite a long journey, 20 plus years, but it's been fascinating, and I've learned a lot. And I really appreciate the opportunity to do work in academia because it lets me meet people I wouldn't meet otherwise and have fascinating conversations like the one we're having now.
Thank you for answering my question. Now, what would you say in this entire field of artificial intelligence? Because now there are many applications and companies and products that are being made. What would you say in this entire field of artificial intelligence excites you the most?
Good question. So I'd say two things, and the first is sort of a precondition for the second. The thing that excites me the most is that we find a way to use these technologies without undermining the kind of good parts of the world today, and we don't want to make worse the difficult parts. So as an example, much of AI today has quite a high energy toll, a significant energy requirement, lots of electricity needed, and so I want to make sure, and what kind of excites me is what configuration, what would the world need to look like to have AI be worthwhile and be constructive and try and minimize the potential harm, right? So that's sort of straightforward. Sounds straightforward, but it's actually very difficult, and we're going to need your help as well, because there's going to be lots of work to do for decades to kind of calibrate how we use these tools. The second part is more specific. Assuming we can kind of figure out ways to govern AI and AI companies effectively, and figure out the energy and the kind of implications for society, assuming we can do that, there's a new area of research, or not new, but emerging, that connects simulations, like, do you guys game at all? You guys play? Yeah. So, simulated environments, like a game environment, figuring out how, if you're an AI, if you learn something in that environment, could you transfer that knowledge into this environment, the real world, And the benefit of being able to do that is, if a machine is able to play a game and with no humans watching, play it millions of times, it can get quite good at particular tasks, right? And so if you can take that kind of experience, for lack of a better word, of playing something a million times or a billion times or more, and transfer it into the real world, you can do some incredible things. There's a team at DeepMind. So this is a company that was started in the UK and bought by Google, which I'm sure everybody knows Google. But DeepMind is a lab that specializes in advanced AI. And what they've been able to do, and you can maybe check this out online afterwards if you want to see some images or videos of it, is they took these little robots, they're kind of robots that you could purchase and tinker with. They're relatively simple. And then they simulated the design of that robot in a virtual environment. And then they had the simulated robot play football, soccer, millions of times. And it got good enough to learn how, if it fell over, it could stand up. And it learned how to kick the ball and kind of chase the ball when its opponent is getting close. And so what they effectively have managed to do is, in a very simple, kind of oversimplified in many ways kind of scale, they figured out how to make robots learn how to play football. And even though that on its own, it's not like we're going to have a robot football league, although that would be cool. But it's a sign of being able to do things that could be used in new ways out in the world. So that's something that excites me a lot, is what could be kind of accomplished in that area. It's called Sim2Real, if you want to Google it. SAM2REAL. But yeah, that's my answer for right now.
Hello, Dr. Penn. This is Jude in London. Okay, so Dr. Penn, with this massive AI race happening all over the world amongst many companies and even countries, what would you say is the current ratio of AI between commercial purposes and ethical purposes, and what do you suggest needs to be done to strike the right balance?
Good questions, guys. So I don't know an exact proportion, and it's difficult because part of what we do on the master's course that I teach at the University of Cambridge is inquire into, what does good mean, right? Because good, for each of us on this call, even the group of the five of us, we may not share an exact definition. We may have different needs and different values that we have to find ways to compromise or negotiate, figure out how to kind of coexist and make sure everyone's preferences we're trying to meet and protect people's needs and wants. If I had to kind of guess, I would say certainly over 90% of AI today is commercial application. So, improving recommendation engines, use in autonomous vehicles, driverless cars. Now, there are a lot of uses in creative industries. So have you guys used any of like the generative AI tools out there to come up with images and things like that? You've done that? Cool. So, I think I would categorize that myself as commercial, but for some it would be an ethical good too, because for them, maybe if they've never learned to draw and they want to feel like they can create without having those skills, then it would be a good for them. But others may feel differently. Others may say, well, I put a lot of time into learning how to draw, and now I can't make money off those skills because a machine can do it. So yeah, I think of the uses of AI that are the kind of for good, that are very explicitly kind of, we're not doing this just for money, we're doing this to solve a problem. I can give you a few examples. Would that be helpful? Would you guys want to hear about some examples? Sure. Okay. So there's a team at the University of Cambridge that used satellite data from heavens above, shining down onto the town of Cambridge, and they could see with heat off of different houses which houses had good insulation and which had bad insulation. And that may sound pretty boring. I admit, I get it. Insulation is not like rock star stuff, but in a world in which climate is a concern and we need to be careful with how we're using energy, to have a system that automatically tells you where leaks are and things like that is quite useful. Yeah. Another example I can give you, this one is cool, this one is Rockstar, so you should check it out online afterwards, is in agriculture, the growing of crops. One of the problems that we've had in that sector is if you are, using chemicals, herbicides and pesticides to capture little weeds, that are going to spoil the crop, that's a bad thing. Because what can happen is those chemicals, if you then go eat the vegetables, this can enter our bloodstream and do us damage. And so one team have figured out with a really big car that's got lasers on the bottom, how to use AI to identify a little weed and then use the laser to zap it, and then you don't need any chemicals. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so that's good. The earth is happier, we are happier in what we eat, and it saves having to use chemicals that could hurt us or hurt animals or the environment. So yeah, those are a few cases of where I think it's being used to do good.
Yeah. So, like you said, there's already AI doing the jobs of many people. So you've often spoken in your interviews about AI causing massive job displacement, and the need to retrain staff so that they remain employable. So could you speak to how this concept could be implemented?
Sure, yeah. I think one important kind of change of perspective that I encourage is to think not just about job loss, where someone is fired because an AI system is able to do everything that they would have been employed to do, but about job transformation, where if you think of a job as a bundle, like a basket of different tasks, so it's kind of like chores, right? You may have multiple chores around the house, or if you go to work with your parents, you may see they have to do this type of work one day and this type of work another day. And so you can think about a job as a basket of tasks. Well, maybe the AI systems that we're seeing today can do kind of 30% of those tasks. And the question becomes, should the employer or should the employee experiment with what it would mean to have AI do those tasks? Because In some cases, it will be very beneficial. I'll give you an example. In North America, I know a doctor who uses AI to record the conversations with consent of patients that he meets with. And then afterwards, the AI automatically prints up the whole conversation and summarizes it. And that's great, because in the past, the doctor would have had to sit and do this, and he may have missed something, or he may have misremembered something, and now he gets to look at the printout and check that it's accurate, and then keep that as a record for the next time he sees that patient. He knows he's got this kind of record. And so it doesn't replace the doctor, but it makes the job slightly easier. Now on the other side, so that's a good case. On the other side, there are times now where AI suggests things that actually maybe aren't the right solution. So in New York City, I had a meeting once with a group of different labor organizations, one of whom are the people that clean a hotel room after it's been used. And the AI had reallocated which order they should clean these hotel rooms in. But it said, do this room on the first floor, then this room on the 7th floor, then this room on the 3rd floor, and then this room on the 14th floor. And to the AI, that's logical because of the kind of system the output it was trying to reach, which is to clean particular rooms for particular clients. However, for the workers, it meant pushing very heavy carts, these giant 600-pound carts with all the sheets and towels and everything, up and down and up and down, and it really made their job much more difficult. And so there's going to be ongoing conversations for the foreseeable future about when is it going to make jobs quicker and more efficient, and when will it maybe make jobs, as it changes those bundle of tasks, less efficient. And it's very difficult to comment about the whole world in every sector. I mean, I could go into some of that a little bit, but mostly I'm trying to characterize what to look for as you ask those questions. And I think it's better to think about tasks rather than jobs, because you can kind of get into the nitty-gritty a little more. But good question.
Okay, thank you. So, Dr. Penn, we are assuming that you and many of your colleagues all attended traditional schools with teachers, textbooks, chalkboards, and calculators. So fast forward 30 years and now you're all renowned AI experts. So are you concerned that students over-relying on ChatGPT and other AI tools may potentially stifle their long-term thought process?
Good question. Yes, I am. I think that there's a lot of interest right now in asking questions about the purpose of education, because the role of education in the world changes as the world changes. Historically, in the West, going to school has been a way to integrate young people and educate young people to understand who is in society with them. In America especially, it was a way to kind of socialize young people, to say, okay, this person, they're from that walk of life, and this person's from that walk of life, and now you're kind of sharing a space and getting to know each other, making friends, and learning how interesting the world is, how complex the world is. And that's a noble purpose. I think that there's good in that. But if AI is going to be used as a tutor, let's say one-on-one tutor, where it knows exactly what you want to learn, and it can help you kind of progress in that area, well, that may check one box, which is it's giving you maybe a way to develop the skills that you're after. Let's say it's programming, or even musical composition. But we might be missing that other part, which is how to socialize out in the world with people that are maybe different in some ways than you. Now, it's very difficult to say what things will look like 30 years from now, but I suspect it will be sort of like today, in that there's a bunch of different offerings, and you can kind of draw from different places. So I'd hazard a guess, having grown up with video games myself, that you guys learn a lot about how to socialize playing games, right? Like, do you have friends that you meet online?
Yes.
and friends that you play with, and you have a lot of laughs and enjoy yourselves? Like, that's part of the fun of playing games, is that you make these friends.
Yeah.
And I think that won't go away. But maybe, it'll be a mix of, games that are purely kind of for fun, and games that have more of an educational tract. So I'll give you an example. I saw a video yesterday, and I can follow up and share this with you if you guys want it, where, have you seen the Apple headset that you put on?
Yeah.
And it changes.
Virtual reality.
Virtual reality. So get this. There's been an app designed that you put it on and you press a button, and it will turn your house into what looks like a level in a game. So you can have like the lava level of your own home, where your couch looks like a rock and the floor looks like lava and the table looks like a stump of a tree maybe. And you can toggle through different skins, for lack of a better word, like you skin a character in a game, but you can skin your environment. And that might be a way to learn about architecture, or the history of art, or things like that. Now, regrettably, this kind of exciting area, I think, will be very difficult to make available to everybody, because it's quite expensive, and it has a purpose, but whether or not that's what everybody everywhere gets, I don't suspect that that's where we're going. And so the question becomes, how do you blend that with other ways of learning? And I suspect, some of what we have in schools today, that you go somewhere and that somewhere has a recess, and that somewhere has sports activities that you share. I think we have at least 2 star tennis players on this call. Is that right? If I'm not mistaken. And if that's, maybe you're all tennis players, but I seem to remember that tennis is important, at least with some of you guys. And that may not change no matter what comes in AI, and I think that's okay. I think many people talk about the future of these technologies as if everything should change, and I think as time passes, we'll find that there is wisdom in the way we do things now, and it'll just be about kind of balancing the new and the old appropriately. That's a long answer, but that's.
Thank you. So, Iman, over to you.
Hi, Dr. Penn. This is Iman in Hong Kong.
Hello.
Okay, so Iraq is a very exciting emerging market with plenty of capital and investment opportunities, an educated population, and a much more stable political climate. There are plenty of AI conferences being held in Iraq all the time, and most recently, the Ministry of Education announced that AI would be embedded into the school curriculums as they revolutionize the Iraqi youth's thinking. At this very early stage of the AI story in Iraq, what advice would you give to governments, regulators, and schools?
Oh boy, big question. I think it would follow on my advice in that context with advice I give in other contexts too, which is that, the role of education is often to prepare young people for the future, and that can involve learning how to socialize, and that can involve learning skills. And we've already kind of talked about how AI can and cannot be used to do things like that. But I think another area that's very important and will become more and more important for young people especially to learn about is at the intersection of climate change and AI. So how do we use these tools to learn about the physical world around us, knowing that floods and droughts and high winds and things like this, biodiversity loss, will make it far more difficult to do the sorts of things that we can sometimes take for granted today, no matter where we are, for trade or day-to-day life, safety and things like this. So, I almost joke that that young people should learn about AI and soil at the same time, because if you know how to grow things, and you know how to use advanced statistics to kind of create new things, then that's a pretty good pairing. So it's sort of the story I said before of a mix of the old and the new. Yeah, I think maybe other practical advice would be it's okay to be a second mover rather than a first mover. I think there's often a competition between nations and companies to be the first to do something. And actually being the second can be quite good. And I'll say this to you guys, if you have siblings, I have many siblings, and I get to watch my other siblings, the mistakes they made, and then I'd say, okay, I won't make that mistake, because I'll learn from my sister and I'll learn from my brother. I'll try and avoid that mistake, right? And countries are in a similar position, that being able to look and say, okay, they tried this and it cost them a lot of money and it didn't work the way they expected it to work. So we'll maybe avoid doing that, but we'll try doing this instead. But I think there's lots of exciting opportunities if it can be done right.
Thank you. Dr. Penn,
Great
while
question.
Iraq is an emerging market that has seen remarkable growth, there are also many side effects associated with this rapid growth. For example, there is heavy traffic, pollution, and multiple power cuts each day. Although the situation has definitely improved over the past few years, there is still room for improvement. We have looked at case studies in other countries where they face the same problems, such as traffic and pollution, where AI has dramatically helped. Do you think that AI can help Iraq alleviate these problems?
Good questions. Great questions. So, I think AI can help. I think it's already being used to help. I mean, so let's look big picture. We'll talk about Iraq, but look at the whole world in a way. And one of the things we find is we're going to need a lot more electricity if these tools, these AI tools, are going to be used, because they're very hungry. They take a lot of electricity, and so we're having to do things like these big companies are buying nuclear power plants to bring them new kind of energy reserves increasingly all over the world. And if that's going to happen, okay, so we have the appetite and we have the new reserves. Another question becomes, well, how do we be really resourceful? How do we know that we're not kind of using more than we have to use? And that's where you're going to see machine learning be really worthwhile, is if you have an energy grid that is managing, I don't want to get kind of too complex here, but if you need, if you have a distribution of energy that needs to be sequenced in order, where it pulls from this power plant at this time and that power plant at that time, and manages the kind of available energy in a way that's as good as it can be. Machine learning and AI is quite good at that. That's somewhere that people are getting excited about how to use it. And the truth is, we're going to have to get better and better and better. We unfortunately can't rest on just the initial gains. We're going to have to keep thinking about how do we just make sure we are being maximally efficient with we deliver energy to different places. Things like traffic, it's sort of the same, but here's the trick. Remember, I've talked about old and new, right? We've talked about that in education and mixing, video games and education, kind of the best of all worlds. For traffic, we may find that no matter how good the AI is, it may not beat a bus or a train. That some of these older technologies that transport more people in less space, that's just, no matter how good the autonomous vehicles get, investments in that sort of infrastructure relieve, congestion and traffic jams and things like this, and have maybe a lower energy toll as well. So we have to design a future that draws from the past, and I think Iraq could do that really well. And so I'm hoping to see, I'm excited to see the sort of things that you're describing here about next steps and what could be done.
Thank you for your answer. There is very early AI infrastructure in Iraq. The story has just begun. Do you think that this is an advantage as Iraq starts applying AI in the country?
I think so. I mean, AI is a technology that requires a lot of ingredients, and so depending on where one wants to store data and the amount of access one wants and the amount of storage one wants, these kind of not rock and roll questions, a little more day-to-day decisions about the kind of the chores of AI, let's put it that way. Those decisions involve big questions about investment in infrastructure and stuff like that, and it depends on each context how ready a country is to do that. England, where I am at the moment, and some of you guys are as well, has just agreed to do a big data center that will be an investment of around $10 billion. And having a data center close to a town makes it easier to access that data quickly. But that model isn't appropriate for the whole wide world. There's so many different places that people use digital technologies, and we're having to find kind of distributed solutions as well. So, I think that one of the benefits that Iraq has is to be kind of mindful of its values, and to try and use these tools in a way that bring about good without bringing about too much harm. And I don't think I've given you a very good answer, but I think the question is an invitation for young people really to start thinking about, well, how would we do this? What are the areas we are most excited about? So let me give you an example, and then hopefully that will answer the question a bit better. The CEO of one of the big AI companies has just written a big letter. You can read it online, called Machines of Loving Grace, and it's the CEO of a company called Anthropic. And in it, he details 5 areas that he sees as very promising for AI, one of which is in the study of biology. And he says that it's exciting for biology because if we can figure out a kind of new tool, like a microscope, but using statistics and machine learning, that may enable all these other discoveries that wouldn't have been possible without that tool. And I think if countries and companies and governments can be specific about, we don't want to use AI everywhere because that will drain all of our resources, but we do want to try and use it in this way or in this way, I think that would be exciting. And personally, I think it's much better to put the energy into AI and the sciences than into other ways it's being used today, like surveillance, that I don't think will benefit societies in the long term in the same way. So it's an exciting time, and I hope to see more kind of knowledge sharing between different groups about where results are coming from and where we should be cautious to avoid AI's use.
There are many sectors in Iraq that would definitely benefit from investment in AI, such as banking, medicine, education, and so forth. What are the pros and cons of giving mandates to international big tech versus investing in local Iraqi startups?
Great questions. I think that AI has been misunderstood. It's since its origins as a technical practice. So if you think about machine learning and AI as something that developers do, you're only getting half the picture, because the other half of the picture is that it's what in academic circles is described as a socio-technical practice, which means you have to understand society in order to really make use of these tools. And so, it's very difficult for a company like a Google or an Amazon to understand all socio-technical settings all around the world, because they have a kind of bias being based in America. They have their view of how the world is, but that's not going to match up with people's worldviews everywhere else around the world. And so to have local companies solving local problems, you get more a kind of thicker understanding of the society in which you're trying to solve the problem, because maybe you're a member of that society. And you see this in Canada, for instance, where I grew up, and different indigenous communities who are embedded in Canada, describing how they would do things differently, how they will do things differently using AI, and seeing opportunities that big tech doesn't have any idea. It's not on their radar at all. So it's kind of an exciting time to think about what you can kind of imagine as the thick middle. So if you have the kind of flashy uses of AI on one side, and the kind of let's not use it at all on the other side over here, then in the middle there's going to be a lot of activity of things that it doesn't need to be on the front of a magazine cover to be very worthwhile. It's more just about everyday uses for everyday people in ways that deliver value, that improve people's lives in some obvious way. That would be my answer.
Dr. Penn, for the final section of today's interview, we would like to ask you some general questions on AI. You have often spoken about the importance of data for models. Is there a concern that the models are advancing too quickly, that the amount of good data would not be sufficient, and as a result, the performance of the models reach an asymptote?
Geez, you guys are hitting me with the big questions here. I like it. Yes, that is a concern. Some say that the internet after 2021 turned from being the greatest repository of human curated knowledge ever into something that you can't tell if a human wrote it or if an AI wrote it. And if you don't know whether a human wrote it or an AI wrote it, it's not a good source to train a model on, an AI model, because you may have kind of garbage polluting in the system that isn't reliable to train on. And unfortunately, that's just the world we live in now, that the AI the internet is kind of corrupted in ways that it hadn't been as exposed to before, and it will be harder to get really reliable data, and therefore that really reliable data will be worth more because people will be wanting it. Great question.
And for the final question, if everyone has AI and everyone is using AI at every level in their institutions, and AI becomes completely commoditized, how can one create an advantage with AI?
Great question. So I talk about a phenomenon that will seem unfamiliar to some today, but I think in 50 years' time won't, which is decomputerization. And the idea here is, in boardrooms and in governments around the world, the word sustainability is inescapable. It is a pressure to advance and to kind of manage the difficulties that we're finding in environmental systems alongside doing business. Now, that sustainability was not something that people talked about really in the same way at that level 50 years ago at all. And I think as we see AI spread into different areas of life, there will be more and more, for lack of a better word, maybe resistance or pushback from people saying, I would prefer a human musician. I would prefer a human working at the service that I go and I frequent, the grocery store or whatever else. And you see this already happening. And so I think the stage after this kind of exploration stage will be a bit of a retreat, in which it's the people that are seen as the value and not just these systems, because these systems anybody can use, and it's therefore the people that are the special part. But we'll have to see. Maybe we'll have to see. But I do think it's worth considering what would that be. And you can think about it in your own life. Like, what do you prefer to have a human for? You probably prefer to have a human parent than an AI parent even though maybe you could get away with more with an AI parent. I don't know how strict they'd be, but it's nice to give a hug to your human parent and do things that like an AI couldn't give you a hug. So yeah, I think it's nice to think about like what's that balance and how do we get it right, and that's what I anticipate will come after all this AI boom.
Thank you so much, Dr. Penn, for joining us today, and we hope to see you soon on AI4Iraq.
Thank you guys. Thanks for your great questions, and I look forward to chatting again.
Please subscribe.
Okay.